I'm John Batchelor. Gordon Chang of Forbes.com is here with me. We're going to Rick Fisher because we're counting high-performance aircraft, combat aircraft, produced and to be produced for the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, Navy, Air Force, the PLA, the works for directly the Communist Party. Rick Fisher joins us because he's been doing some counting about projections. Rick, a very good evening to you. Jane's estimates of China's future combat aircraft fleet size. We have two numbers here. There's a very large number here, 1562. By when, Rick? And how do we get that number?
John, I wrote this article for Jane's a few weeks ago, and it's based on information I obtained from friends in an Asian government during a recent trip to Asia, and they disclosed their projections. In 2014, China, they say, has a total of 946 modern combat aircraft. By 2020, they project that China will have 1,562 modern combat aircraft.
That is a lot. That is a little. What does it look like against, say, the U.S. and Japan in Asia? These are high-performance aircraft, so they're not going to fly over the Pacific. They're going to operate there in the East China Sea and the Sea of Japan,
or over India. And this gives the Chinese options to essentially concentrate against any one of their major antagonists while holding enough in reserve to deter the others from attacking. This number of aircraft allows the Chinese to consider, for example, a major operation against Taiwan while preventing the Indians and the Japanese from getting involved, and deterring the Americans as well. The Americans have to decide that they will have to take on a very large air force and try to wrest air superiority from this air force in order to hold the line on the Taiwan Strait.
Gordon?
Rick, what you did for Jane's was really fantastic. The numbers that you came up with, how do they compare with the Pentagon's estimates of China's Air Force that were recently released in their report?
Gordon, very good question. The American estimate in the latest Department of Defense report on the Chinese military is 300 less than the current estimate from my Asian source. I account for that by noting that the Pentagon report was a year ago. The Asian government numbers were from 214. Also, the Asian government includes the Shan H-6, a large 1950s vintage bomber which has been progressively upgraded. My guess, my estimate, is that the American numbers do not include the H-6.
Do these numbers, do these aircraft, you've got lots of different types here that the Chinese are building or have built already, do they include stealth aircraft?
The stealth aircraft are coming, John. The Chengdu J-20, my Asian friends estimate will number 24 by 2020. This aircraft is in advanced development. Either the fourth or the sixth prototype of the J-20 was just revealed within the last 48 hours.
And if I recall correctly, the Chengdu J-20, that's for penetrating our carrier asset base. In other words, the Navy would put up a screen, and what you need a J-20 for is to get through that screen and strike at the carrier.
Indeed, John. It is a stealthy, super cruising fighter, a strike fighter with a internal payload bay large enough to hold anti-ship missiles. It is a real threat to our naval carrier task groups.
Gordon?
Rick, you point out that a couple months ago, China and Russia came to terms on a 30-year gas supply contract. The Russians were going to sell gas to China. But that it seems that an unwritten part of this agreement was that Russia was also going to start to sell some very advanced fighters and technology and parts to the Chinese. If you could talk a little bit about that, because this is really important. This is not just Chinese planes we're talking about. We're talking about Russian top-of-the-line fighters.
Gordon, indeed. An essential part of the oil and gas deal was essentially a Russian pledge to open a new phase in Russia's military technical cooperation with China. First, we'll see the sale of the S-400 surface-to-air missile. This is a 400-kilometer range surface-to-air missile, very modern, top of the line. It will allow the PLA to cover all of Taiwan and then some from the Nanjing military region. Soon after that, we expect that an agreement will be signed for 24 Su-35 fighters. This is a 4++ generation fighter, but the real prize for the Chinese will be the engines, which may actually power the first version of the J-20. The Chinese Achilles heel in aerospace is their advanced turbofan engines, and they're looking to the Russians to give them a leap. In addition, Vladimir Putin personally has been trying to enlist China in the development of a new large twin-aisle wide-body airliner. The Chinese have their own plans for a similar airliner, but Putin wants to enlist the Chinese to help break the Boeing-Airbus duopoly. My sense is that the Chinese will take the Russian technology and do their own thing, much like they did with a Russian fighter about a decade ago. But at a minimum, the Chinese will get a new wide-body airliner a lot quicker that they will immediately apply to aerial refueling missions and the such. And then finally, the Chinese and the Russians are really talking up a space technology alliance. And if this is realized, then Russia may be accelerating China's goal of occupying the moon and being the first to reach Mars. You
write that the Chinese are working on an H-20 strategic bomber, but more interesting, by 2025, more interesting and compelling to me, what is a Tupolev flying wing? What's it for?
This is called, in the Russian term for this, John, is Pak-Da. The fifth-generation fighter that we know as T-50 is called Pak-Fa, F-A. But Pak-Da will be a new strategic bomber. We thought it was going to be a supersonic bomber, but within the last 2 years, the Russians have clarified they're building a subsonic bomber, and it will be a flying wing, much like our B-2 Spirit bomber. But the H-20, according to a large amount of informal Chinese sources...
We've got 20 seconds, Rick. Go ahead.
Will also be a flying wing bomber. And the danger is that the Russians may be helping the Chinese realize that goal.
A flying wing bomber. There's only one use for that. That's attack, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Gordon? You know them by their planes. Gordon Chang of Forbes.com, Rick Fisher, who's a senior fellow at the International Assessment and Strategy Center, publishing most recently in Jane's Defense Weekly, Outgunned 2020. I'm John Batchelor.